Joining us now to talk about the midterms and more, Ellis Henican, the Newsday columnist who is checking in from Newsmax, New York, and from Washington via Skype. It's Sarah Isgur Flores, the Deputy Communications Director for the Republican National Committee. Sarah, forgive me this lack of manners. I know it should be ladies first, but there is Ellis just chomping at the proverbial bit to tell us how great it is that Hillary is going to Pennsylvania and how it's going to work for the Democrats in this gubernatorial race. Ellis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir, and Sarah. Listen, this is not a fair test because Governor Corbett is so much in the dumper that it doesn't really matter what anyone else does. He's going to lose. Listen to me right now. He's back 10 and 15 points in most of the polls. He's very unloved by the people of Pennsylvania. Let me put it like this. You could send Barack Obama in there and he'd still lose.
Now that is interesting, and boy, maybe that's what ought to happen, huh, Sarah? Maybe Governor Corbett ought to say, "Hey, President Obama, come on in on behalf of my challenger, Tom Wolf." But of course, go ahead.
We haven't really seen the president campaigning for any Democrats this fall, and for good reason. He's wildly unpopular in most of these states. He's raising tons of money for them. He's had 56 fundraisers so far, so they're willing to take his money, but they're not willing to have him on the trail, which is why you see Hillary and Bill Clinton having to step up to the plate. Of course, Hillary's pretty tied to the president's policies, so I think this will hurt her in 2016.
Well, Hillary shows up at a Women for Wolf rally. Meantime, there's Chris Christie. He's been busy. He was in Florida weighing in for Rick Scott. But Governor Christie has had some challenges recently. And so, Sarah, I'm just kind of curious, Governor Christie going out on the trail, does it help him even though it may not help candidates like Tom Corbett necessarily?
Oh, I think he's a very popular governor in his state. I think he's popular with Republicans around the country. I think what's also very interesting is how competitive many of these northeastern blue state governor races are. Look at Massachusetts, look at Connecticut. The narrative has been that Republicans do well in the midterms this year because it's red state senators. But look at some of these blue state governors and you start to see a different story.
Yeah, it could be different. Ellis, we haven't spoken a lot about Hillary's presence.
Can I stop you 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I stop you 1 second? Did you say a moment ago that he's weighing in for Governor Scott?
Now listen, both just for the record.
Is that what you said?
Just for the record.
Is that what you said, my friend?
Just for the record, Ellis, both Governor Christie and I have had surgery to control our weight. And while we're in the mode of full disclosure, Stormy from C-Lab 2021, I mean, you know, we can just go ahead and go through our entire resumes here.
Let me say this, if Chris Christie is what passes for popular in the Republican Party, Sarah, you guys got to find some new candidates. I'm sorry.
We have plenty. We have tons of candidates for 2016. You guys are the ones with only one.
Yeah, what about the coronation of Queen Hillary?
Listen, here's the thing about Hillary, and it's also true of Barack Obama. Here's the honest political analysis. It depends where you are. Right? There are places where these folks are popular and places where they aren't. If I'm in Kentucky and I'm running as the Democratic Senate candidate, or I'm on my home state of Louisiana and I'm running as Mary Landrieu down there, you don't want Barack Obama around because they're highly unpopular in those states. But I do notice the president is going up to Connecticut. He's in California, out in the West right now. In New York, he remains very popular. It's just the reality of politics. You use your big guns where you have them. Frankly, I wouldn't send Chris Christie anywhere, and I'm sure if they could get rid of him at the Republican Governors Association, they'd be happy to put someone else in there.
Well,
nationally, Barack Obama's approval rating is in the low 40s. I don't know that counts as popular anywhere.
I tell you what, folks. We're going to continue this conversation, and it's interesting that Ellis mentioned Kentucky, because when we come back, we're going to take a listen to an answer before an editorial board that, well, it could shape that race. Ellis, Stormy Henican, and Sarah Isgur Flores will rejoin us for this discussion.
Did you vote for President Obama? 2008, 2012?
You know, this election, it isn't about the president. It's about making sure we put Kentuckians back to work.
Did you vote for him?
I was actually an 08 delegate for Hillary Clinton, and I think that Kentuckians know I'm a Clinton Democrat through and through. I respect the sanctity of the ballot box, and I know that the members of this editorial board do as well.
So you're not going to answer?
Again, I don't think that the president is on the ballot as much as Mitch McConnell might want him to be. It's my name, and it's going to be me who's holding him accountable for the failed decisions and votes that he has made against the people of Kentucky.
Allison Lundigan Grimes heard there speaking before the editorial board. I believe it was the Louisville Courier-Journal, refusing to answer whether she voted for President Obama. Of course, Ms. Grimes, the challenger, hopes to unseat Mitch McConnell. Let's welcome back in for our continuing conversation now the Deputy Communications Director for the Republican National Committee, Sarah Isgur Flores, who is checking in via Skype from Washington, and from Newsmax, New York, our good friend Ellis Henican, the columnist for Newsday. So, Sarah, that non-answer, is that another brick in the wall against Allison Grimes in Kentucky?
Oh, I think this is the end of her race as a viable candidate. Chuck Todd this morning said this was a disqualifying answer. The one thing I will say is it goes to the larger point of just how toxic this president is to Democrats on the ballot. They can't even answer whether they voted for him, let alone support his policies.
Well, now, you heard what Sarah had to say there, Ellis. What are you going to tell us about Allison? At least she had message discipline going after Mitch McConnell. What do you say?
Well, first of all, it's a cringe-inducing answer. I mean, let's concede that. It's the wrong answer and uncomfortable, and she's got to do better with it next time. What's interesting to me, though, is that here you've got the #1 Republican in the Senate. The polls all show this as still a very, very tight race. I don't know who's going to win it. I don't think Sarah really knows who's going to win it, nor does Chuck Todd, J.D., or even you. It's surprising this late in a game with so much money coming into Kentucky that she remains a genuine threat to Senator McConnell, and it's going to go right down to the wire. I think it's a pretty exciting race, honestly.
Well, I know it's hard to believe, but maybe stepping outside partisanship for just a second, historically, recently, Senate leaders have had a tough time. I think to Harry Reid in Nevada, it went right down to the wire for Harry. So is this really that much of a surprise, Sarah?
I think that Allison Lundigan Grimes is doing better than she should because she refuses to answer questions. Voters don't know who she is, and so they have been willing to hear her out. And I think that last night's answer really confirmed she's not going to tell you what she stands for, and she's certainly not going to tell you the truth about what she stands for. And so that's why I think this is the end of that race. And Democratic candidates
Sarah,
from it and actually tell voters what they're for and what they stand for instead of just hiding behind non-answers and talking points.
All right, go ahead, Ellis.
Yes, I mean, Sarah, that's just a slam. I mean, I understand that's not an analysis. Let me see if I can give it to you better. It's a very tight race. McConnell is in a squeeze, right? I mean, he has a ton of power in Washington, but that doesn't carry a lot of weight at home when many voters, many Republican, particularly Tea Party voters and social conservatives, they consider being entrenched and powerful in Washington more a negative than a positive. So if McConnell's going to win, he's got to thread a very delicate needle. And he may win. I mean, Kentucky is a state that leans Republican. He ought to win, but it's proving to be surprisingly difficult for it. We'll see whether Grimes has what it takes to close it. She may not. But it's not simply a case of everybody loves McConnell and that Grimes is just a liar that nobody believes. That's just not a fair analysis of the race.
No, she's an empty basket that she's trying to let other people...
You don't like her, I get that.
I don't like people who don't say what they're for and what their actual policies are and try to just skate through into the Senate.
And
right,
we will
Mitch
have
McConnell's a huge success and everybody loves him, right?
We will have to end it right there because there's a four-letter word that intervenes, T-I-M-E. Our time is up. Sarah Isgur Flores from Washington, D.C., Ellis Henican from Newsmax, New York. To you both, our thanks, and we'll talk again before the midterms.